You're never too old for a truck driving career. Here's why. We receive all sorts of email and comments on our YouTube channel asking us if we think the people writing in are too old for a driving career. Today, I want to address that question. In my opinion, no, you're not too old to be a truck driver. Today's video is brought to you by FleetNav. FleetNav is an ELD supporter unlike any you've ever heard of before. If you have a support issue, you can call in and get a live person, an expert that will guide you through the steps to get you back on track. Check them out at fleetnavsystems.com. General health is a consideration. It's a given fact that truck drivers need to be in good physical health. Just because you're a certain age doesn't mean you're in poor physical health. You can be in poor physical health at any age. In fact, these days, people are living longer because they're generally in better health than they were a generation ago. Critics of older truck drivers like to say that an older driver's reaction time, response time, and reflexes are slower than a younger fellow. But a semi is not the type of vehicle that lends itself to snapping the wheel and trying to make a quick reaction to whatever scenario is appearing in front of them. You just can't do that with a truck. Good drivers, well-trained drivers, watch the road far up ahead of them. Remember the Smith system? So they anticipate potential problems and don't get caught up in them. Older, more mature drivers are generally held to a higher standard by the DOT. In fact, most jurisdictions require of drivers over the age of 65 an annual physical and an annual driving test. This is not something that's required of aging four-wheelers, though it should be, or younger truck drivers as well. Older, more mature drivers are generally more responsible behind the wheel. They grew up in a time before cell phones, so they're not prone to that distraction when driving. Older, more mature drivers can have a good level of confidence behind the wheel. It's often a job that they've wanted to do for a long, long time. Older, more mature drivers are less likely to be bullied by their carriers and their dispatchers, something that the younger drivers suffer from. They generally won't allow themselves to be forced out in bad weather or when they're tired. Some of the older, experienced drivers certainly won't allow this because some of them have experienced firsthand the price of going out on the road when they're tired or when they're not ready. As a professional driver, you remember all of your scary experiences and try not to repeat them. Trucking can be a good career choice for mature drivers. Trucking is actually one of the few industries that welcomes older candidates. People turn to trucking as a career change for a number of reasons. Perhaps they've lost their job because of COVID-19, or they just hate their office job because of the stress involved, or perhaps it's just because it's something they've always wanted to try and the freedom of the job calls to them. And trucking offers all sorts of different opportunities. There are all sorts of varieties of truck driving jobs. There's long haul, there's short haul, there's regional, there's delivery work. It depends on what works best for you. Trucking is a very versatile industry. I started trucking at a very young age. At my first carrier, all the drivers were older than me. They were all a whole lot older than me. Some of them were pretty tough old birds, but they were just full of experience, and I learned a ton just from watching them and being around them. I knew a whole lot of truck drivers that were trucking well into their 80s, and they were all fine hands at the wheel. Drivers that age have earned the right to do pin-to-pin freight or no-touch loads. Now let me tell you a story about my favorite old-time truck driver. Bear in mind that these old-time guys could be crafty. So years and years ago, the carrier that I was working for, bought a whole bunch of new trucks, and they all had new Cummins engines in them. And they were brand new, so they hadn't been broken yet, and they were kind of weak. But the carrier brought in a mechanic from Cummins to go over the motors with us and how to maybe adjust the fuel pumps a little bit so we could get a little more pull after the break-in period. So all the shops, just the bobtail trucks, were inside in the shop. It was a huge shop, and this mechanic from Cummins just picks a truck to demonstrate on and pulls open the hood to show us how to look and adjust the fuel pump. And he takes one look at the fuel pump, and this truck is still in break-in, mind you. He takes one look at the fuel pump on this truck that he's chosen and goes, holy cow, this pump's already been turned right up. So the operations manager focuses on the number of the truck, realizes whose truck it is. It's Simon, and he spins looking for Simon to start yelling at him, just as you hear the back door bang, and that's the sound of Simon slipping out the back door. So we all get a good laugh on this. So anyway, the operations manager later on, after the mechanics left, drags Simon into the office and just chews him out, saying these are brand new trucks, they're under warranty, I don't want you touching these things. You leave these things alone. They're not yours, they're not for you to fiddle with. Don't touch anything. Read Simon the Riot Act. Fine, fair enough. Now Simon was an incredible mechanic. He certainly knew how to adjust fuel pumps. Bear this in mind. A few weeks down the road, Simon's headed out east from Calgary, and he's headed towards Medicine Hat. Calls for Medicine Hat. Truck's broken down. Now Medicine Hat back then was about a 3.5 hour drive out of Calgary if you were pulling trains like we were. The trucks weren't real fast, they were heavy. So it was about a 3.5 hour drive. Simon calls from the Husky truck stop in Medicine Hat, says, hey, I'm broken down. The operations manager, who's also the head mechanic, because it was a small company, says, well, what's wrong with it, Simon? Simon says, I don't know. You told me not to touch them. You come figure it out. So the guy gets in the company service pickup truck and drives 3.5 hours out to Medicine Hat, starts the truck, looks around, knows instantly it's just the fuel filter that's plugged. The restriction gauge is right to the wall. Knows right away it's just the fuel filter, and he's got to change the fuel filter. So he's driven 3.5 hours, spent a half hour looking at this truck. He's into 4 hours, and all he had to do was swap the fuel filter out. That was a fairly common procedure for us back then. The fuel wasn't that great. The filters clogged all the time, and this guy knew full well that Simon knew what the problem was and could have fixed it in 10 minutes flat. So he knows he's been had. He knows he told Simon not to touch this truck. Simon has not touched this truck. He's made this guy drive all the way out there just to swap a fuel filter out. So the guy knows he's been had. The guy knows Simon's got the better of him. So he just kind of, okay, that's the deal. He swaps the fuel filter, goes back into the Husky truck stop where Simon's having coffee, sits down with Simon and says, well, you got me good, Simon. Can I buy you lunch? Simon says, hell no, I've been sitting here for 4 hours because of you. Gets up and takes off and leaves with the guy sitting there with his jaw hanging on the table. Simon told me that story later, and I laughed for about 20 minutes. It was typical Simon. Simon just had to get the better of this guy, and he did it and looked beautiful doing it. One of my favorite stories, one of my favorite drivers, Simon Fleckenstein. At the end of the day, age may be an advantage rather than a deterrent to older truck drivers. You've got a greater level of maturity, better judgment, and a whole lot of life experience that certainly counts towards having common sense. So if your health is good and you want to live the dream, I say go for it, because you're never too old to be a truck driver. So stay safe, keep the rubber side down, and I'll see you on the back haul.